Welcome to Fantasy Factions first YouTube video. Some of you will know me as Overlord, my username on the forums. My actual name is Mark, and today we've got Brandon Sanderson interview, which I hope you're going to enjoy. So Way of Kings, absolutely huge book, spanning at 1,000 pages. Even then the book is taller than your average kind of novel. So the question I had for Brandon was, with people like Patrick Rothfuss kind of realising their works were too long, and the Kingkiller Chronicles, for example, was one big book that he split into 3 parts so that it was publishable. What was it about Way of Kings that meant, even though it was so big, it still had to be just that one book?
I couldn't do that same thing with this particular book because of the way the plot arcs work. It worked very well with Rothfuss's book, I've loved his books. But what he's got going on is sort of an episodic story where quote does this and quote does that and quote does this, and you can kind of separate those as vignettes. With Way of Kings, what I was doing is I've got 3 storylines for 3 separate characters who are each going through troubled times, and if we were to cut the book in half, for instance, you would get all of the setup and all of the trouble and none of the payoff. And so what would happen is you'd have actually a really depressing first book where nothing really good happens and people are in places that mentally they haven't come to any decisions yet, they're struggling with problems. Essentially you'd only get the first act, you'd get all the setup and none of the payoff.
I see. So this, the two books in front of you here, obviously being re-released. Which point is it that this cuts off at? With
this cuts off. We decided we had a fairly good break point because Shallan's storyline comes to there's a resolution and some decisions have been made, and it's kind of we broke it right at the kind of middle point where people are deciding, you know, we've had these struggles, now we've had some sort of a promise of victory, but the victory or things haven't actually happened yet. And so I do strongly recommend that people read both books, have them both together to read together, because there is a certain poetry to the arcs that are built into this that you know, the second half is lots of massive payoff for the first half. But we did find a decent break point. But conceptually it's one novel, even if you can break for a while and then pick up the second one. Conceptually, to me, they are one.
So the series, people are presuming are going to be 10 books long because of a comment you've made. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's going to be 10 books. 10 is a holy number in the series. It's related to the orders of Knights Radiant, the number of magic systems and things like this. So 10 books. Is the 1,000-page format something that's going to continue throughout the series? Each of the books will be median long. I'm not sure, you know, I can't tell you exactly how long they will be. Instinctively looking at my outline, I feel that the first is probably one of the longest in the series, which is a bad way to do it, honestly. You really want to have the first ones be the quick pow, and then the middle ones get to be the thick, meaty ones. But I'm expecting, this one was about 400,000 words. I'm expecting them all to be around 300,000 words. There may be some that go a little bit longer. It'll depend on the book and how many characters I've decided to deal with in that book and the plot structure of the books. Okay, so Way of Kings, for people who don't know the background, I'll just give you a little bit. The book was written actually before pretty much anything else of Brandon's was published. I think it was 2002, 2003 he finished it. Obviously he then went on to publish Elantris, Warbreaker, Mistborn as well, of course, and the Wheel of Time books. Has his experiences with these other books changed the way that he sees the Stormlight series continuing from this point? When I finished Way of Kings the first time in 2002, it wasn't ready yet. And I knew when I finished it, I knew something was wrong. My skill wasn't up to writing a book of this length yet. I was very proud of it, but proud in the way that, you know, someone who finished their first marathon but with a horrible time would be proud of having run that marathon. And I knew I needed to get better as a writer before I could actually do it justice. And so yes, it's evolved. There were flaws in the original book. The character of Kaladin was just boring in the first write of it. Dalinar stayed about the same. Dalinar's plot changed the least, and who he was changed the least. But both Shallan and Kaladin had deep flaws in how I had written them, and I just wasn't creating characters deep enough yet. And so I set it aside partially because I knew I needed to get better as a writer. When I wrote it again in 2008, actually it was 2009, I think. I started over from scratch. I threw away everything and did it again, and my skill had increased by that point to the point that I could do it justice, I think.
So for people who visit fantasyfaction.com, we asked around on our forums and also a few other forums that we visit for some questions for Brandon. This section, you'll be able to see his answers to them. Okay, so The Way of Kings, a question that we had from the forums. Is The Way of Kings a rediscovery of old magic or the invention of new technology, or maybe a combination of both? Could you elaborate?
It's an excellent question. Somebody's been reading my mind. And first, I do want to say thank you guys all for reading the books. Thank you for all you do in supporting me as a writer. So with this series, one of the things I wanted to approach was both of those concepts, actually. A lot of fantasy has the feel of magic's going away, magic's dying. This goes back to Tolkien with the idea that, you know, the elves are leaving and magic is going to leave the world, and that's always made me a little bit sad that these books have this theme. And so I did want to write a book about the return of magic. But beyond that, I'm very fascinated with technology and the development of technology, particularly as it relates to magic. And so this series is about the rediscovery of magic and how magic interacts with science, and the treating of magic in a scientific way on a large scale. You see that in each of my books with magic being treated by scientifically, but I really want to do it in a way that changes the lives of everyone. The common people, magic changes their lives much as technology changed the lives of the common people in the technological revolution we went under. And so that's what I'm going to try to approach in these books.
Brilliant. Okay, the next question we have, I think this one you might have answered before, but have we met all the main point of view characters yet, or if not, what percentage are we talking?
You have met almost all of them. Let me do a count. Let's see. Main characters in the book are, in the series, Kaladin and Dalinar, Adolin, Yasna, Shallan, and Navani, whom you all met in this book, and most of them had viewpoints. Zeth, Taravangian, and Taln, and one of the other heralds. I'm not going to tell you who that is, but I think I'm sure met that person. I know what you're seeing there, and so I think you've met them all, basically, and of course Wit. Taln is the person who shows up in the epilogue. So.
Excellent. Again, another question that's kind of similar to that one. Why are so many Alethi point of views used as opposed to others?
Why are so many Alethi point of views used as opposed to others? This was basically one of the changes I made as I was working on the series. I originally had planned to show all these viewpoints from all across the world. And I found that when the original time I tried this book, that since people's plots weren't interwoven together, the book was very difficult to read because people weren't connected to one another emotionally and spiritually. And so because of that, when I rewrote the book, when I started again, I made sure to put Dalinar and Kaladin and Adolin in proximity of one another, so that their stories would play off of each other, and so you would have a consistent storyline. That said, we do have, those three are all Alethi, but Shallan is not, and Zeth is not, and those two have fairly significant parts in this book. Most of the characters will be Alethi. for that reason, that their stories are tied together. But you will see, this is one of the reasons why with this book, once I pulled everything back and was telling Alephi's stories, I felt I needed to show the breadth of the world. And that's where the interludes came from.
Yep.
Was me wanting to jump around the world and show all of these different other characters and cultures, but show them in bite-sized portions, so that you didn't get overwhelmed with all of these different characters, that you knew when you go to an interlude, you can read this person, and then you can kind of forget about them. You don't have to follow who they are, because they're there to show you the breadth of the world and what's going on, but not necessarily to show you, to go on a big distracting tangent.
Yep, I see. Excellent. And that, again, it fits in kind of with this question, final one in this section. Could we ask, the pictures and the maps and the illustration sheets are absolutely fantastic, and for me as a reader really kind of added, especially the way you kind of put pictures after you described them in a way, because then you could compare what you thought to what you saw. How do you think that added to the book, and was that something you planned, or was that something the publishers, or? This
was all me. In fact, the publisher was kind of skeptical,
okay.
Because it's not something you see in epic fantasy, and publishers, you know, they have this weird sort of mix inside of them. They want to do what's been successful in the past, and yet unless you innovate a little bit, you won't continue to be successful, and that's a hard balance. And to Tor's credit, they decided that what I was pitching on this book with all these illustrations was in the right direction, that it would be evolving and it would help with the sense of immersion rather than fight against it. But they really worried that it would feel like a graphic novel, which there's nothing wrong with graphic novels, but we don't want the audience to get the wrong opinion of the story. And one thing I was very careful to do is I don't illustrate the characters. I want the characters to be how you imagine them, and I don't want to give you a picture of them. So these illustrations, I really wanted to be in-world illustrations done by someone, done by Shalon. This was something I'd wanted to do for a while, and I felt was integral and important to the book, and that without it, the book wouldn't work as well, because Roshar is a pretty weird place. It's got some pretty bizarre feelings to it, and I wanted to give some illustrations to help the reader get a real sense that this is a real place. So that was me. I'm glad that people are enjoying them. We did dedicate quite a bit of work to making them all come across. There are 4 illustrators that worked on the book, and so